Basketball can be serious business. In cities across the country, fans are invested in watching their favorite team compete at the highest level. The NBA is a place for hard-fought victories, emotional moments, and best of all, incredible highlights. That's why it can be so surprising when something comical happens. Whether by making a hilarious error or just by doing something funny and unexpected, players have been surprising their fans this way for decades. Here's some of the funniest fails and best moments in NBA history. Chris Paul's premature jumping. Being in the NBA when you're barely 6 feet tall is a tough thing, to say the least. That's why it's so rare. In fact, it might even be more rare than players who are 7 feet or taller. But since players are notorious for lying about their actual height, we can't know for sure. Out of the slim group of players who make it to the NBA at 6 feet or below, even fewer manage to excel. Chris Paul is part of that elite family. Although he's never won a ring, he's been an All-Star 11 times, and he's paved the way for a whole new generation of ball handlers, including Steph Curry and Kyrie Irving. But unfortunately for Paul, he hasn't managed to overcome his small stature completely. There are some moments that stand out and frankly have made Paul look hilarious. One prime example is his tendency to jump up prematurely during dead ball plays. Before the ref blows the whistle, all 10 guys on the court are standing mostly still, and Chris Paul is almost always the shortest on the floor. This seems to get him revved up in unhelpful ways. For example, during the 2019 conference semifinals, Paul had the misfortune to get called for a jump ball against Klay Thompson, who was at least half a foot taller than him. If it wasn't bad enough, the jump ball also came at an unbelievably important moment in the Rockets' entire season. Down 2-0, Game 3 was tied with just over 1 second left to play. Everything hung in the balance over this one crucial moment. All the stress clearly got to Paul, because he began hopping before the ref blew the whistle. In fact, he did it multiple times, ramming into Klay Thompson in the process. Klay was clearly annoyed by this, but amazingly, it worked. Somehow, Paul got the tip and batted it to the one person the Rockets desperately needed, James Harden. In the end, there just wasn't enough time on the clock. Harden barely got the shot off and missed by miles. The Rockets managed to win in overtime, but lost the series in 6 games. Colin Sexton stalls. If you've ever tried to start a motorcycle that was low on gas, you'll recognize what's happening to Colin Sexton in this next clip. As we all know, basketball is extremely fast-paced, and players have to make lightning-speed decisions about where to position themselves, especially on defense. It's often a very difficult thing to do, but then again, those who make it to the NBA are usually gifted at this sort of thing. In hysterical fashion, the Cavaliers' Colin Sexton put that all into question during the game against the soon-to-be champion Toronto Raptors. Caught between guarding Norman Powell, a good three-point shooter who didn't have the ball, and Serge Ibaka, a not-so-good three-point shooter who did have the ball, he became mentally overwhelmed and started malfunctioning. The strange shuffling glitch lasted for several seconds. Sexton's eyes were wide with fear as he realized he was stuck. Had it been a strategy to try and simply throw Ibaka off, it almost worked. Ibaka paused for a moment and was clearly startled by what was happening in front of him. But in the end, it was an easy bucket for Ibaka. To this day, no one knows for sure what went wrong in Sexton's wiring. As far as we know, it hadn't happened before, and so far, it hasn't happened again. James Harden and his invisible friends. It's a poorly kept secret that James Harden has a hard time getting along with other NBA players. His list of beefs, rivalries, and alienated teammates is nearly as long as the NBA roster itself. The list that isn't long is the list of James Harden's friends. Even his own teammates have often beefed with him. This includes Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul, both of whom ended up fleeing Houston to get away from him. Still, even then, it's hard not to feel bad for Harden after watching this clip. Shooting a technical free throw, Harden has to do it alone, without the support of his teammates on either side. For many players, this makes the free throw harder, but Harden was totally unfazed. Clearly, Harden is used to playing with imaginary friends.
Just pure shooters.
Shaq's locker room meltdown. Shaquille O'Neal is one of the funniest NBA players ever. It's no coincidence that he's had such a successful TV career long after his retirement. But even during his playing career, Shaq was doing hilarious things both on and off the court. While playing with the Boston Celtics in 2010, O'Neal was fined by the NBA for comments about officiating. It's actually not even clear what was so bad about what Shaq said, but it may have been one particular line that got him in trouble. He said, "If I was a fan, I would be pissed." In what was arguably a huge overreaction, the league fined Shaq $35,000. When he found out about the fine, Shaq went on a hilarious and totally sarcastic rampage in the locker room.
The NBA fined you $35,000.
They fined me $35,000? Why, Kevin? I got fined $35,000. Why, Kevin? They fined me $35,000.
This included tackling Kevin Garnett, who luckily had a good sense of humor about it. Most people found this clip to be a funny and lighthearted response to an unreasonable fine, but others weren't so amused. After all, $35,000 is a lot of money for most people. Members of the uptight asshole community criticized Shaq for flexing his wealth and making fun of the fine. In the end, the whole ordeal was largely forgotten, except for the clip of Shaq first reacting. which is still used in the Shaqtin' the Fool intro theme today. As I mentioned earlier, funny moments have been happening in the NBA for decades. Let's travel back in time a bit and look at some vintage moments. Vintage funny moments. Today, LeBron is famous for a ceremonial chalk toss at the start of the game, but LeBron wasn't the first to do it. In fact, it's possible he got it from his idol, MJ. Jordan was famous for clapping the chalk together over the scorer's table and making the dust go all over the place. It also seemed to always happen right in front of beloved Bulls announcer, Johnny Kerr. This started a whole routine where each game, Kerr and his co-host would show up with different tools to block the dusty assault. First it was surgical masks, then it was gas masks, then it was full-on umbrellas. Yet somehow, even after this, Jordan never took the hint. He was probably just too focused on the game. Here's another funny moment from the late 80s. Have you ever seen a ref do this before? It'd be nice to know what caused this ridiculous behavior. There's bound to be an explanation out there somewhere. Unfortunately, these highlights are over 30 years old and records are not kept with the same kind of detail they are today. But in a way, the mystery almost makes it funnier. Here's a vintage fail that has to do with what was going on off the court, not on it. In fact, on the court, one of the more exciting moments in basketball history was taking place. In this ultra-rare sequence, one game-winning half-court shot is followed by another game-winning half-court shot. If that wasn't enough, it's then followed by a mid-court altercation where a losing player threw the ball at the winning team in frustration. It's hard to imagine more exciting basketball than this, but unfortunately, it was the 1980s, and the cocaine crash had set in for this accountant. He slept through the whole thing. Speaking of cocaine, check out what NBA mascots used to be like. If you have any idea what team this abomination is dancing for, let us know in the comments, because we honestly have no idea. All we know is we better go back to some modern clips before things get any weirder. Reggie Bullock's jersey fail. Here's a moment that happened in late 2020, which was both an epic fail and a serious mystery. During a home game against the 76ers, New York Knicks guard Reggie Bullock pulled off a screw-up that has probably never been done before. He entered the game wearing the wrong jersey number. Bullock wears the number 25 and has for his entire NBA career. That is, until this evening. Suddenly, Bullock was wearing number 23, but then, in the blink of an eye, he was wearing number 25 again. It didn't help that another Knicks player, Mitchell Robinson, also wears the number 23. Fans at home thought they might be hallucinating. When the referees finally noticed what was happening, they immediately blew their whistles and brought the entire game to a halt. Once they took a closer look, it became obvious why his jersey number kept changing. There were two different numbers on Bullock's jersey. On the front it said 25, the correct number, but on the back it said 23. This explained why it seemed like his number kept magically changing, but it produced more questions than it answered. Why was Reggie Bullock wearing a jersey with two different numbers? How was Reggie Bullock wearing a jersey with two different numbers? Bullock insisted that he had no idea what was going on, and later, he was able to give a more detailed explanation. Apparently, this was the Knicks' first home game of the season, and it was the first time Bullock had put the jersey on. Jerseys are made ahead of time and left in the locker room for them to put on when it's game time. Something must have gotten screwed up in the printing of the jersey, and Bullock simply didn't notice. Whatever the NBA's printing process is, it must be stupid fast, because they had a brand new, corrected jersey for Bullock on the sidelines before the end of the first quarter. Drunk LaMelo. Coming into the NBA when you're college age is challenging for many reasons. LaMelo Ball entered the NBA in 2020 at just 18 years old. Most kids are just starting college and getting hammered every day at that age. Apparently, so was LaMelo during a game against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
LaMelo slips, falls. Ball picked up by Windler. LaMelo gets it back. Gets it stolen away by Windler.
Aw, ain't that cute? Here's something you don't see every day. In fact, it may have never been seen before and could never be seen again. Yet, if you were watching the Miami Heat playing against the Washington Wizards mere months ago, you would have been one of the lucky few to see it. It's an event that's hard to describe. You just have to witness it.
Butler able to take it away, and Beal commits the foul. That'll be the second foul against Beal, and those two are doing a little dance together.
It seems like Jimmy Butler was probably the person instigating the moment. He thought it was hilarious, and so did his teammates and most of the people watching. The person who apparently didn't think it was funny at all was Bradley Beal. Who knows why Bradley had such a bug up his ass? Maybe he thought a foul should have been called. Maybe he was pissed the Wizards were losing. Despite his complaining, Bill couldn't help but crack a smile while Butler was goofing off. The greatest player of all time. Ever since LeBron won his fourth championship in 2020, people have gotten serious about calling him the GOAT. The debate will rage on for years, but if there's one thing the king is not the GOAT of, it's free throw shooting. In fact, his percentage from the line has consistently been around or even below the league average. But if that wasn't disappointing enough, here's a downright devastating free throw attempt the so-called GOAT made just this past year.
It's not an easy situation, as LeBron James, I believe, just airballed the free throw.
Yes, he did.
The devilish work of the cameraman really helps display how bad this shot was. The net fluttered just slightly as the ball sank well before the target. Airball on a free throw is a classic moment of shame, and it's a pretty epic fail coming from the first or second best player ever. Derrick Rose malfunctions. It turns out Colin Sexton isn't the only player having mechanical problems. So is former MVP Derrick Rose, who glitched out while trying to inbound the ball recently.
Oops. He says, I got you. Oh, no.
This is a bit hard to watch. After all, 10 years ago, Rose was the MVP and led the Chicago Bulls all the way to the conference finals. Since his period with the Pistons, he's been traded to the Knicks. That basically means switching from one terrible team to another. But hopefully for Rose, the Knicks are looking better than usual in 2021, and he may finally get a chance to shine again. Julius Randle makes Stephen A. cry. Speaking of the Knicks in 2021, here's a crazy moment that happened just weeks ago. Julius Randle cost his team the game after blatantly traveling and turning the ball over. To make matters worse, Randle got angry about it and started arguing with the ref and trying to fight. Even after the game was over, Randle had to be escorted off the floor. Most people were appalled by his behavior, but not Stephen A. Smith. In fact, Stephen A. cried tears of joy on First Take the following morning.
They were down 18. I got it. Thank you so much, but I got more one. But I need both because it's an emotional moment for me right now. Don't interrupt me right here.
Not because the Knicks are any good, and not because he thought Julius Randle didn't travel, but because his beloved Knicks were finally showing signs of life. We hope you enjoy watching these funny moments in NBA fails. Which moment do you think is the funniest? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below, and be sure to drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss any great content like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video.